computer. Good evening, good morning, good day, depending on where you are. This is Glenn Greenwich and Tom Pope coming to you live. Today's discussion is business services. What are businesses wanting and needing in this COVID environment? And uh, and we're gonna have some discussion around it. Tom, what do you think are some of the needs that you think the businesses have?
Well, first, we should actually define small businesses. I think the legal definition is extremely misleading. If a small business can have a 500 people, but be classified as a small business just because it has a couple owners, that's not really a small business.
True.
How is that similar to Tyrone and his wife who own a dry cleaner? Uh,
Right. Right.
how is that similar to a five staff restaurant? Um, they're two separate categories. How should we define what we're talking about when we say small business?
Well, it's interesting. We're glad you brought it up because I was actually reviewing an application that just came out from the borough president's office, connected with Mr. Cohen, who just bought the Mets, and he's donating 17 million, and it's to be distributed to small businesses in the borough of Queens. Again, how do you define a small business? One of the things on the application I thought was very interesting. It was, well, if you're a restaurant, well, normally it says if you made $1 million 2019, um, then you're outside of this grant eligibility. But if you're a restaurant in that same district, your allowance goes up to 3 million. So it's interesting the you know how do you put numbers around that? Because to me, if your business is doing $1 million, that seems like not a small business necessarily, but it depends on your overhead, depends on how what your cost of doing business are, and of
Well,
course,
let's take a look at what happens there. If that's the case, where this pool of money is going to restaurants with that amount, most of that money is going to be out of reach of a small five-person, almost fast food operation or sit-in operation where you have four or five tables and not too many staff. That small business is suffering just like the large restaurant.
well, I would add that they're probably suffering even more because
Right.
they don't have the capacity to do as much takeout as a bigger business. Because if you only have, so let's use your example. You've got five staffers, so those five staffers can, so you probably have maybe two cooks, um, some kind of wait staff, service staff, and somebody cleaning or bussing dishes or whatever else. So um, you've got people doing multiple tasks inside of that particular business. Now, let's stay with that particular business. So what does that business need to do? Well, if that business doesn't have an online presence, they need to have one. And so a grant supporting online accessibility, being able to compete with the bigger um, online venues, so that you can carve out your niche. Maybe you've got a Colombian restaurant, or maybe you've got a Beijing dumpling house, which is kind of like a specialty type item that you're servicing. So how do you now get that word out? So there are a couple of things, a couple of ways to do that. Um,
You're also talking about reorienting from sit-in to mail order or delivery.
right. and that's an important key because where were your revenues coming from? You know, what was your main revenue source, and can that be converted or shifted in another direction to an online delivery type basis production? And those are the kinds of questions that will have business owners stay up late at night, but also it has them look at the functionality and the viability of their business. You know, um, what's my main product line? Is my product line now shifting because I can't have indoor dining for X amounts?
Now,
Um, and
since
of course, that's just a restaurant. So I mean, we've got other kinds of small businesses like stationery and candy store and so on and so forth that are also struggling. But go ahead.
before we leave the restaurants, since you bring up the online presence, we should also maybe portion small restaurants. Lately, there's been a problem with some of the large online entities that make deliveries, and they list the restaurants, but they're charging the restaurants more than they should be charging. And they're even listing restaurants without their permission. So when we talk about online, we need maybe more control by that small restaurant of their own online presence.
Well, I think that what we're looking at as we convert and go into these new areas, we're going to need a different kind of policing, a different kind of enforcing the quote unquote rules of engagement. And as a city, the city agencies then now have to shift as well in terms of how they do things. You know, in COVID, they can't do things the same way they were doing it before. So they've had to shift. Their policies have changed. City council has asked and put some laws in place to help support business development. They have the open area um, where they're converting a parking lot to actually outdoor dining space, and you can see that all around the city, which is great in nice weather. But what do you do in the wintertime? You know, the wind chill is about 15 degrees. You're in an enclosed area, has to be open. How do you keep that place heated? And this one I didn't even realize. How do you keep your food hot? So you're looking at, well, that's a great idea in the warm weather, but for the colder weather, you're kind of out of luck. So if you don't have the delivery and pickup either through a service, and I understand that some of the services, just not to say anything disparaging about Uber Eats or any of the other services, but they've had to reduce their costs so that they're not eating up the profits of the restaurants that they're delivering for. So there's been some give and take around those kinds of services, um, to be able to be mindful that this is a tight economy. It's not like it was before, and you've got these restaurants that are hurting, that have had to lay people off, and so on and so forth. Um, but I want to also add that this online presence is not just for restaurants, because you're a stationery store, you're a FedEx shipping kind of center. Um, that's not necessarily a FedEx, but you maybe have FedEx services and other delivery services or money transfer type things that you're doing. How do you advertise for that? How do you now let people know that you're in business and you might be just up the street from them? One of the things that my daughter taught me is she goes around with her phone and she walks places, and a big department store like a Macy's or something, she walks in, the first thing she does is check to see what the sales are for that day. What are they offering? Now, I'm not sure if it picks it up based on her profile that she might have answered some questions about what her likes are or her interests are, but I'm sure there's some demographic information that they now are looking at and are able to now provide her some enticing um, thoughts and ideas that would get her to actually come in the store and go look in those departments.
Now, when I look at the Small Business Association recommendations for help for small businesses, I really don't get a sense of the specifics that we really need. I will see comments like there's a section, help for small businesses during the pandemic, mentioning uh, the Paycheck Protection Program. But how do we get specific information to help a small business deal with the fact that maybe half of their staff is no longer working there? Um, how can they help that staff? How can they replace the staff? We need more guidelines than the generalities that I'm seeing on the Small Business Association website.
Well, it comes down to leadership. It comes down to the city council putting in play policies and laws and procedures that will support the distribution of the money. I think one of the downfalls of the PPP, um, Paytech Protection Program, was that you had to go through the banks. And by the way, the banks, being a business, looked at it and said, "Well, who are the clients that I want to serve? Bigger clients." So the mom and pop shops that maybe didn't have all their paperwork, or didn't do consistent business, or were asking for a smaller loan, were kind of put on the back burner. Now this second round are supposed to be inherent more productive for the smaller businesses. So again, will that happen? We're hoping so. The direction is that they put some restrictions in place to support the smaller businesses, but the banks again are in control of who and how that money gets distributed. And again, if you're a bigger client, you're going to probably get a little bit more attention than a smaller client.
In your community board, what are some of the complaints that you've heard from small businesses about how to deal with these problems?
Well, it's interesting. The small businesses are looking for technology solutions. I think one of the things that we've had, even in downtown Jamaica, for the smaller shopkeepers, is having access to more data, to a higher speed internet. High speed internet is one of those things that should be available to no matter what your size of business is. And so, but you have areas and pockets where you still have DSL. Now we've got fiber optics most places, but to still have a DSL line is kind of archaic. And as a business, how do I put my cashier um, register system on something that's online so that when somebody swipes, or you type in their card information, that it actually is not having them sitting there and waiting, for 2 or 3 minutes to get a response back, because the infrastructure and the throughput on the network is so slow. Or they may not even be able to get the latest and greatest cash register because you don't have the bandwidth to support it. Everything is going on cloud, so you've got a lot of different capabilities that require high speed internet.
I think we need better supervision. It was, excuse me, something like 30 years ago, the providers were expected to upgrade to fiber, high quality fiber. And the average user was actually charged for this amount, but the providers never put in the infrastructure. So we need more supervision to make certain the providers are actually helping people use the equipment.
Yeah, and one of the things, one of the things that came down for us is that we got a $10 million revitalization monies from the governor, and it's taken a while to actually have that get expended. And one of the things was putting in high speed internet to the local businesses. Because again, if you're a community that wants to grow and you want to bring in some of these tech companies, you've got to be able to provide high speed internet. I mean, there's no way that you're going to get one of these newer firms coming in when you don't have that kind of capability.
Now, um, we're talking about internet, but we're also dealing with staff. We have staff who might not be able to come in because they're afraid to deal with a COVID spreading situation. Um, how can a business be, be compensated? It's trying to stay in operation, but it needs staff.
Well, believe it or not, there are actually monies available to train your staff from the city agencies. Small business services has some staffing associated with that. Some of the I'm trying to think, the business solutions also has some monies available for that. And so, as a business owner, you want to look for those kind of opportunities. You want to look for where monies are available to help train your staff, to upgrade your staff. Um, and I think one of the main things that um, especially small businesses fall prey to is that sometimes the owner or the manager is is in the business so deeply that they don't see what the futuristic needs. They're doing the day-to-day operations, and they haven't taken a breath and stepped back and looked to see, okay, good, here's what we're doing. Where do we see ourselves going? What's the vision? Where do we want to get to? What are some of the short-term and long-term goals of your business? And you've got to be two-headed about it. You've got to be able to manage the operations, the current operations, but you also want to be looking to the future in terms of where you want to go and take things.
Um, well, there's a lot to consider. What would you say in closing?
In closing, I think that the business owner has to look at um, keeping the business vibrant, adapting to the change. COVID has been a huge change for most businesses. You know, and assess. You look at it, assess how you've done, and where there may be some opportunities for improvement and or expansion, because you want to be looking at expansion as this market changes so drastically and dynamically.
Well, if you like what you're seeing, contact us through our Facebook page, Community and Social Change. Let us know what you think.
Very good. We're signing out. This is Tom Pope and Glenn Greenwich.